Did you know in Japan, some elders believe that objects left untouched for too long can come alive, not with ghosts, but with memories we refuse to release? Imagine opening a drawer filled with festival charms, a kimono folded decades ago, or love letters written on paper that has long turned yellow. Each one is silent, yet each one pulls on your heart, whispering stories that weigh you down. After 60, it is rarely the physical weight of boxes stacked in corners that drains us, it is the invisible burden of emotions we tie to them. Japanese wisdom teaches that space itself has meaning, that the emptiness between things is not absence but beauty. When our homes overflow, our hearts struggle to breathe. For many seniors, the promise of dealing with clutter someday lingers for years, but someday often never arrives. The truth is, letting go is not betrayal, it is a blessing. Each object you release creates space for peace, air, and light to return. Picture walking into a room where shelves no longer suffocate, where the past is respected but not hoarded, and where calmness greets you like an old friend. That transformation begins with a single choice, a single item released at the right moment. If you've ever felt the burden of holding on too long, you already know how heavy it can be. Tap like right now and subscribe to Wise Aging Seniors, because this story might be the very step that frees you to live with more peace, clarity, and joy. Meet Seijuro Yamane, 73, a retired calligrapher from Osaka who now lives in California with his daughter's family. For decades, Seijuro's art had been about strokes of ink, silence, and the meaning found in space. Yet his home told a different story. His attic had turned into a shrine of forgotten life, bundles of scrolls stacked in corners, charms from festivals long past, brushes that had broken years ago but were too precious to discard. Each item carried not just dust, but a memory. And every memory felt too sacred to let go of. When Seijuro's wife was alive, she had often told him that the house felt heavy. After she passed, his attachment deepened. Objects became anchors, proof that the past was still near. He would open a box and find letters from his youth, or old receipts from family trips, and feel both joy and pain. Throwing them away seemed like erasing his own history. So he kept everything, building silent towers of yesterday. But everything changed on a quiet Saturday afternoon. His granddaughter, only 7 years old, tugged at his sleeve and asked why she wasn't allowed to play in the attic. She had imagined it as a magical place, full of hidden treasures. But to her disappointment, when the door creaked open, all she saw were endless boxes, cluttered shelves, and objects that smelled of age. Her innocent words pierced him. "Grandpa, why does it feel like the attic is sad?" At that moment, Seijuro understood something he had never admitted. He wasn't protecting these objects. He wasn't keeping them alive. Instead, they were holding him hostage, chaining him to times he could never relive. What he had thought was love was actually fear, the fear of letting go, the fear of forgetting, the fear of emptiness. His granddaughter's question revealed what his heart already knew. The memories he cherished weren't inside the objects. They were inside him. That day became the beginning of his journey into Japanese decluttering wisdom, a path that would show him how to honor his past without being imprisoned by it, and how to find peace by creating space for the life still ahead of him. Trick 1. Kintsugi Memory. One of the first lessons Seijuro learned on his journey came from a broken teacup. It had been sitting at the bottom of a wooden box in his attic, a delicate porcelain piece cracked down the middle. For years he kept it, not because it was useful but because it had once belonged to his wife. Every time he touched it, he felt the sting of grief and the comfort of memory at the same time. Like so many seniors, he held onto the broken cup because throwing it away felt like discarding love itself. But in reality, it only deepened his sorrow. That was when Seijuro remembered the ancient Japanese art of kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with lacquer dusted in gold. Kintsugi does not hide cracks or flaws, it illuminates them. The break is not erased but honored, becoming part of the object's history. Inspired, he decided to repair just this one cup. With careful hands, he sealed its crack and traced the line with shimmering gold. When he placed it back on the shelf, it no longer looked like something damaged. It looked like something reborn. Through this act, Seijuro understood a powerful truth: he didn't need to keep every broken item. The memories of his wife, their shared tea on quiet mornings, the laughter over spilled cups, were not trapped in dozens of unused dishes. They were alive in his heart, his stories, his calligraphy, and now, in this single golden-lined cup that carried both the wound and the healing. For seniors facing the challenge of emotional hoarding, this lesson is more than art, it is a path forward. Instead of clinging to every cracked dish, faded shirt, or torn book, choose one that speaks the loudest. Honor it. Display it. Let it carry the story, and allow the others to go. Keeping everything only creates noise. Keeping one sacred piece creates clarity. When his daughter visited and saw the restored cup, she gasped at its beauty. For the first time, she did not see her father surrounded by piles of broken things. She saw him cherishing what mattered most. That reaction reminded Seijuro that decluttering isn't erasing, it is distilling. It is the difference between drowning in memories and letting them shine. If you've ever struggled to release something broken, remember kintsugi. Ask yourself, which item, if mended and honored, can carry the weight of my story? Repair that one. Let it stand as proof that imperfection is not the end. And then, free yourself from the rest. Because one golden memory can hold more peace than 100 forgotten fragments. Trick 2. Obon offering of release. As Seijuro continued his journey of decluttering, he faced an even heavier challenge: what to do with the belongings tied directly to those he had loved and lost. His father's wooden fan, worn smooth from decades of summer use, sat untouched in a drawer. His late wife's apron, faded and stained from countless family meals, hung quietly in the back of a closet. These objects were not just things. They were vessels of memory, soaked with emotion. To part with them felt impossible. Yet keeping them locked away, unseen and unused, also felt wrong. They carried too much weight, both sacred and suffocating. The turning point came during Obon, the Japanese festival dedicated to honoring ancestors. For generations, families have gathered in midsummer to light lanterns, visit graves, and prepare offerings that welcome the spirits of loved ones home for a brief visit. Growing up in Osaka, Obon was one of Seijuro's most cherished traditions. He remembered the way his grandmother would set out bowls of fresh fruit and rice at the family altar, whispering prayers of gratitude for those who had passed on. So, in his California home, far from Japan but still bound to its spirit, Seijuro decided to weave his decluttering into this sacred ritual. He carefully gathered the objects most tied to his father and wife: the fan, the apron, and a small box of trinkets that had no practical purpose but held enormous emotional weight. Instead of discarding them with a sense of shame or guilt, he placed them gently on a small altar he created in his living room. He lit incense, bowed his head, and whispered thanks. Thanks to his father for strength, thanks to his wife for love, thanks to the objects themselves for carrying the memories all these years. Only after this moment of reverence did he release them. The fan was donated to a cultural center, where others could appreciate its craftsmanship. The apron went to a local thrift shop, perhaps destined for another kitchen where laughter would rise again. To his surprise, instead of sorrow, Seijuro felt relief and gratitude. The items were not discarded. They were honored, thanked, and allowed to continue their journey. This became his guiding principle: releasing can be an act of remembrance, not rejection. For seniors, this approach can transform decluttering from a painful separation into a spiritual gift. Instead of clinging to objects out of fear of forgetting, you acknowledge their role, honor their meaning, and then let them go so their energy can bless someone else. For Seijuro, Obon taught him that letting go did not diminish his love. It amplified it. His home grew lighter, his heart steadier, and his memories sharper. And when his granddaughter asked why there was now more space in the attic, he smiled and said, "Because I gave our memories back to the world." If you've ever held onto a loved one's belongings because you feared losing them twice, try transforming release into ritual. Light a candle, say a prayer, whisper thanks. In gratitude, grief becomes softer. In letting go, love continues to live. Trick 3. Wabi-sabi corners. As Seijuro's journey deepened, he began to notice something simple yet powerful: his house had no room to breathe. Every corner of every space seemed to hold something: a box, a chair, a stack of books, or a piece of art leaning against the wall. Nothing was ever empty. Nothing was ever still. And it was in that realization that he turned to a principle that had guided his calligraphy for years but that he had failed to apply to his living space: wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is a Japanese philosophy that finds beauty in imperfection, transience, and emptiness. In calligraphy, Seijuro knew that the space between strokes mattered as much as the ink itself. Without that pause, the writing could not breathe. The same was true for his home. By cluttering every corner, he had erased the beauty of stillness. So he made a decision. He would leave one corner in every room completely empty. Not just cleared, but intentionally bare, a living expression of wabi-sabi. The first corner he cleared was in his bedroom, where an old trunk had sat for years, holding clothes he no longer wore. When he removed it, the emptiness startled him at first. The space looked incomplete, as though something were missing. But as the days passed, the sunlight pooled in that bare corner in a way it never had before. The room felt lighter, softer, almost alive. He repeated this in the living room, removing a stack of magazines and a small side table that nobody ever used. Suddenly, his granddaughter began to sit cross-legged in that corner, reading books where there had once been only dust. It became a space of quiet joy, a reminder that emptiness can invite new moments to unfold. For seniors, this practice carries deep wisdom. After 60, many homes become museums of the past, every inch filled with objects meant to preserve memory. But wabi-sabi teaches us that memory doesn't need constant reminders. Instead, it flourishes when given space. An empty corner is not a sign of neglect, it is an invitation for peace, for reflection, and for the possibility of new memories yet to come. Seijuro began to cherish these corners as much as his repaired cup or his Obon rituals. He realized that emptiness was not about losing, it was about creating a pause, the same way a rest in music makes the melody more beautiful. When visitors came, they often noticed the calm in his rooms without even understanding why. His daughter once asked, "Why do your rooms feel so peaceful now?" Seijuro simply pointed to the corners and smiled. If your own home feels overwhelming, choose one corner. Clear it. Leave it empty on purpose. At first, it may feel strange, even unsettling, as if something is missing. But with time, you'll see what Seijuro saw: emptiness is not a void. It is space for light, for calm, and for the next chapter of your life to enter gently, without clutter standing in the way. Trick 4. Haru Ichiban Sweep. In Japan, the first strong winds of spring are called Haru Ichiban. They arrive suddenly, often sweeping through towns with enough force to shake windows and rattle doors, signaling that winter has finally ended. For Seijuro, this natural shift became the perfect metaphor for his next step in decluttering. After months of hesitation, he realized that sometimes letting go cannot be done in small, hesitant pieces. Sometimes it requires a bold sweep, a decisive action that clears not only the room but also the spirit. One bright March morning, Seijuro woke early, opened every window in his California home, and allowed the crisp air to rush in. It wasn't just a gesture, it was an invitation. He wanted nature itself to join him in lifting away the stale heaviness of his past. Standing before a closet that had not been touched in years, filled with clothes that no longer fit and boxes that had long lost their meaning, he decided to act. Instead of sorting through every piece slowly and debating its worth, he chose to empty the entire closet in one sweep. The process was liberating. Each box carried down the stairs and each coat laid in a donation pile felt like a gust of wind pushing the weight from his shoulders. By the time the closet was bare, sunlight stretched into spaces that had been dark for decades. For the first time in years, he saw the back wall, clean and empty, and he realized how much mental clutter those unseen objects had created. This practice became more than a single act. It was a reminder that decluttering is not always about slow, careful choices. Sometimes, especially for seniors who feel overwhelmed, it is about creating momentum. By taking one whole space, whether a closet, a pantry, or even a drawer, and clearing it completely, you break through the paralysis of indecision. You stop asking, "Should I keep this?" and instead declare, "It is time to let go." When Seijuro's daughter visited later that week, she noticed immediately. "Father, this house feels different," she said, pausing in the hallway where the breeze still lingered. He smiled and told her about the Haru Ichiban winds. Just as spring sweeps away winter's cold, so too can a bold act of decluttering sweep away years of emotional weight. For anyone struggling with emotional hoarding, this lesson is clear. Choose one space and clear it completely, as if inviting spring into your home. Don't overthink. Don't cling. Let the winds of decision carry you forward. Because sometimes, peace doesn't arrive slowly, it rushes in, like the first winds of spring, leaving your home lighter, brighter, and ready for a new season of life. Trick 5. Senbazuru Release. Among the many boxes in Seijuro's attic, the most painful to face was the one filled with letters. Some were love notes from his late wife, others were letters exchanged with old friends, and many were yellowed envelopes carrying words from relatives long gone. 4 years, he couldn't bring himself to open the box. Every letter carried a piece of his heart, and the idea of throwing them away felt unthinkable. Yet keeping them locked away in silence brought no comfort either, it only deepened the ache of what was lost. One evening, while remembering a story his grandmother told him as a child, Seijuro found his answer. The story was of senbazuru, 1,000 paper cranes strung together, believed in Japanese tradition to bring blessings, healing, and even wishes for peace. Folding cranes had always been a meditative practice in Japan, one that transformed paper into prayer. Suddenly, he realized he could turn his letters into something more than clutter. He could turn them into art, into blessings, into a bridge between memory and release. With trembling hands, Seijuro began. He unfolded the first letter, read it one final time, whispered his thanks to the writer, and then folded it into the shape of a crane. One by one, the words of the past transformed into delicate wings. As the days passed, his attic filled not with boxes, but with strings of white, yellow, and faded ink-stained paper birds. When he had enough, he strung them together into long chains and hung them near the window, where sunlight touched their fragile forms. The box that once weighed him down had now taken flight. When his granddaughter saw the senbazuru, her eyes widened with wonder. "It's like the memories are flying," she whispered. And in that moment, Seijuro realized that the act of folding had shifted his grief. The sorrow trapped in stacks of paper had become something beautiful, something alive. By releasing the rest of the paper after completing the cranes, he allowed his memories to remain honored, but no longer heavy. For seniors, this practice holds a profound lesson. Decluttering doesn't always mean discarding outright. Sometimes, it means transforming. By turning objects of sorrow into art, you allow healing to take place. Old letters, photographs, or even fabric can be reshaped into something that carries memory in a lighter, gentler form. The weight is not erased, it is given wings. Seijuro's senbazuru became more than decoration. It became a daily reminder that memories don't need to be buried in boxes to be preserved. They can be displayed, celebrated, and then released when the time feels right. And in that transformation, grief softens, gratitude deepens, and the home becomes not a storage room of the past, but a sanctuary for peace. If your own home holds boxes of painful memories, consider this. What if you folded them into something new? What if you gave your memories wings instead of chains? Sometimes the simplest acts, one fold, one crane, one release, can turn sorrow into beauty and clutter into freedom. Trick 6. Tsukumogami Reminder. Among the many lessons Seijuro uncovered on his journey, perhaps the most unusual came from an old story his grandmother once told him when he was a child. She had whispered it by lantern light on humid Osaka nights, making his young imagination shiver. The tale was about tsukumogami, household objects that, if left unused or neglected for 100 years, were said to awaken as spirits. These spirits, she explained, could become mischievous or even vengeful, punishing those who treated them carelessly. As a boy, Seijuro thought it was just folklore meant to scare children into taking care of their belongings. But as he grew older, the idea stayed with him. Now, standing in his attic decades later, surrounded by boxes of forgotten things, he felt the story tug at his heart. His grandmother's words returned with a new kind of wisdom. Perhaps these objects, though not literally alive, still carried an energy. Perhaps his neglect of them had created not peace, but silent resentment within his home. When he looked around, he realized how many items had been shoved into corners, hidden under cloths, or stacked in piles where no one could see them. An old shamisen with snapped strings, shoes his father had once worn, paper lanterns that hadn't glowed in decades, each one sat in silence, yet demanded space, time, and emotional weight. Seijuro asked himself an honest question. If I cannot care for these things, if I cannot honor them, then why am I keeping them here to gather dust? That question became his guiding principle. He decided he would keep only the items he was truly willing to honor. Those that could still serve him, inspire him, or bring joy would remain. But those that sat unloved, unseen, or uncared for, he released. He believed that by doing so, he freed not only his space but also the lingering energy tied to neglect. In a way, he was protecting his home from the bitterness of forgotten things. For seniors, this story carries a powerful metaphor. Think of the objects in your home that sit untouched for years. They may not come alive as spirits, but they do hold a kind of presence. They take up room in your closets, your mind, and even your emotions. Every neglected object is like a whisper of unfinished business, a weight you continue to carry without noticing. By keeping only what you are willing to care for, you lighten both your home and your heart. Seijuro's daughter noticed the change. His rooms looked brighter, calmer, freer. "It feels like the house is happier," she said. He nodded, thinking of his grandmother's story. The spirits of neglect had been replaced by gratitude, because every object that remained was one he respected. If you have drawers or boxes of forgotten things, remember the lesson of tsukumogami. Ask yourself, am I honoring this object, or am I imprisoning it in dust? If the answer is neglect, it may be time to release it. In doing so, you are not just decluttering, you are restoring harmony, ensuring your home holds no silent resentment but only peace, respect, and love. Trick 7. Ma, the sacred pause. The final and perhaps most profound shift in Seijuro's journey came not from what he removed, but from what he allowed to remain empty. In Japanese culture, there is a word that carries quiet power, ma. It refers to the pause between sounds and music, the silence between words and conversation, the open space between objects in a room. Ma is not absence, it is presence. It is the fullness that emerges only when we respect the beauty of space itself. For much of his life, Seijuro had feared emptiness. He filled shelves, corners, closets, and even his calendar as if silence or stillness were proof of failure. But as he walked through his decluttered home, he began to see emptiness in a new light. One shelf in the living room now held only a single vase. The corner of his bedroom, once stacked with boxes, now welcomed morning sunlight. Even his calendar, once filled with unnecessary obligations, now had free afternoons where nothing was scheduled. And yet, rather than feeling incomplete, these pauses felt whole. Seijuro began to practice Ma intentionally. He left shelves half empty, not because he had nothing to put there, but because the space itself was valuable. He resisted the urge to refill drawers, choosing instead to enjoy the freedom of knowing they were not packed to the brim. He even left time open in his day, allowing himself to sit quietly in the garden, listening to wind rustle through the trees. These pauses gave him more than calm. They gave him clarity. For seniors, this principle carries profound wisdom. After 60, life can feel crowded, not only with possessions but also with memories, responsibilities, and worries about the future. Embracing Ma means giving yourself permission to pause, to create breathing room both physically and emotionally. An uncluttered shelf can be a mirror of an uncluttered mind. An empty afternoon can be a gift of rest. The sacred pause is where healing happens. When Seijuro's granddaughter visited, she noticed it immediately. "Grandpa, your house feels lighter," she said as she curled up on a cushion in the living room. What she felt was Ma, the calm invitation of space. It was not what he had added, but what he had left open that created peace. His home no longer shouted with the noise of clutter. It spoke in quiet harmony. If your own home feels crowded or your days too heavy, try embracing Ma. Clear one shelf and leave it half empty. Resist the urge to fill every corner. Block out an hour with no agenda but to sit, breathe, and simply be. At first, the emptiness may feel strange, even uncomfortable. But in time, you'll discover what Seijuro did. In the sacred pause, life is not diminished. It is enriched. In emptiness, you find not lack but abundance, the fullness of peace, clarity, and freedom. By the end of his journey, Seijuro's attic no longer loomed as a place of heaviness. What was once a maze of boxes, broken objects, and forgotten memories had transformed into an open, sunlit room where air moved freely. His granddaughter, who once stood at the doorway afraid to enter, now raced up the stairs with laughter, treating the attic as a place of wonder rather than sorrow. The transformation was not just in the space, but in the way his family experienced it. The attic no longer carried the silence of grief. It carried the warmth of life. For Seijuro, the act of decluttering was never about erasing his past. Each ritual, each release, and each pause had taught him a lesson. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It means choosing. It means deciding which memories deserve to stay present with you and which can rest peacefully without demanding your daily attention. His repaired teacup lined with gold reminded him of resilience. His Obon rituals reminded him that love can be honored without clinging. His empty corners, his open shelves, his strings of folded cranes, all of them whispered that peace comes not from holding tightly but from releasing gently. The emotional weight he carried for decades had not been lifted by force, but by intention. And in that intention, his health and spirit began to change. He felt lighter when he walked through his home. He breathed easier knowing his daughter and granddaughter would not inherit piles of unresolved clutter. He felt calmer sitting in silence, aware that the emptiness around him was not loss, but the presence of peace. His home became a living reflection of his inner life, balanced, calm, and free. For seniors, Seijuro's story is not just an example, it is a mirror. Many carry the same hidden attics in their homes and hearts. Boxes filled with belongings that once symbolized love now weigh them down with guilt or fear. But Seijuro shows us that decluttering is not discarding life. It is clarifying it. It is choosing to honor the few things that truly carry meaning, and letting the rest return to the world where they may serve another purpose. His journey reminds us that every act of letting go is not an ending, it is a beginning. It is a step toward freedom, dignity, and a lighter future. And it is never too late to start. Every item you release is not an ending, it's a new beginning. If Seijuro's story touched you, tap like, share this with a friend over 60 who deserves peace, and subscribe to Wise Aging Seniors, because your golden years should be filled with light, not weight.